This is going to be a little bit of a long video going over the Banshee VGT controllers. So when you first open up the software, you're going to have your turbo selection. And then you go down to your map sensor. You select what type of map sensor you have. Exhaust pressure sensor, same thing. Engine speed. Select what engine you have. If you don't have one, there's actually a universal input, user defined, and then you just set whatever pulses you have. Same thing with the turbo. Selects the RPMs of turbo if you have a turbo turbine sensor. Safety, you got digital wastegate, turbine speed limiter, and engine speed. So digital wastegate sounds just like that. It's a wastegate, but it's intended to be more, it's like a digital. So once you hit your PSI threshold, it opens up the turbo in an attempt to mitigate how much pressure you have. Same thing with turbine speed. The engine speed limiter, that basically says at this engine RPM you will not go below this position as far as vane control. So your VGT control logic, the first one you're going to have is your drive boost ratio. It's pretty easy to use. You set your desired drive pressure, so how much drive pressure you want per your boost pressure, and then the turbo, well, the Banshee controller will attempt to control as best as it can. Starting position is 0's exhaust brake, 100's wide open. So you set where you want to start. The lower you go, the more back pressure you're going to have. The harder it's going to be to spool the turbo when you first take off. Anything over 20, anything below 20%, it's kind of iffy. So the boost turbine logic, that's a legacy. So the guys that don't have an exhaust pressure sensor yet, but they want to upgrade to the newest firmware, they can still use this. Basically, it's a boost to vane position table. So based on, let's say, 0 PSI, where do you want the turbo to be, 2 PSI, and so on. You set the values. The only value you can't change is 0. Exhaust brake control, the starting position 100% is full brake, and you can back off of that. If you have one of the older kits where it actually came with a knob, you can adjust the brake. 85 is where you want to be, but the current kits don't come with a knob. The invert exhaust brake knob, again, is for legacy kits, so if you want to have it ramp up to the left, you click on that, hit save, and it just changes which way it's maxed out. Bypass brake RPM just basically ignores the engine RPMs. Highly recommend that you actually connect that wire so the engine can talk to the controller. This way the controller knows how fast you're going. The exhaust brake threshold, trigger threshold, all that's saying is if you look down below where it says brake trigger voltage, how it's bouncing from 0 to 0.01, you just want to make sure whatever you're off throttle, you're above that. So if you have like a VP44, I believe they're around 7 or 8 volts off throttle, 12 volts on. So you just have to be above the off throttle voltage. The cold start wet stack prevention, basically what this does, so if you just have the cold start assist on, the engine speed disengage doesn't really come into effect here, nor does the cold start exhaust pressure. All that does is when you first turn the key on, the controller turbo boot up, it's going to close all the way to the full exhaust brake. As soon as the engine catches, it's preset to 500 RPMs, then it's going to let go. That just helps build back pressure while you're cranking while it's cold. If you have the enabled cold start assist enabled, it's going to stay closed, start up, open up, and then work its way back down, and it's going to build 20 PSI, and you can sit there and idle. Once you get a little throttle past that 1300 RPMs, it disengages it won't come back on unless you enable the wet stack prevention, then it'll actually re-enable. And then here's your gauges. You can data log, you can open your logs. So if you click on open, it's going to show you all the logs that are already made, and just creates an Excel spreadsheet. So the commanded feedback position, actuator temperature in Fahrenheit and Celsius, actuator load, all that is how much power it's actually taking. Right now it's using 3% of the maximum amount of current or power it can take in. Turbine speed, common sense. Engine speed, map PSI, manifold absolute pressure, PSI and bar, exhaust pressure and PSI and bar, boost to drive pressure to boost pressure ratio, vehicle voltage. So if you look at your vehicle voltage, you're having issues and it's below 12 volts, and nothing's on, you probably need new batteries. And then the CPU temperature of the Banshee controller in Fahrenheit and Celsius as well. So I might have flipped this upside down for some of you guys, and I apologize. I might be able to edit it somehow later. But let's see. So as you can see right now, from the before I put it up here, you saw the command and feedback position are at 0%. So if you look at the engine RPM and then look at the exhaust pressure versus boost pressure when I first crank it, you should probably see a little bit of exhaust pressure. It's going to let go. After about a minute or so, it should close back up. Well, actually, it should be less than a minute. Alright, so my predefined setting was 20 psi. The longer you wait, the more precise it'll get. So now I'm going to high idle my engine. So if anyone has a Banshee controller and they want to tie it into their edge like I did, the universal adapters from edge are switched to ground, so you actually have to have the edge power the sensors. If not, it'll cause a lot of issues. So when you first turn the key on, you got to wait till the edge fully boots up before you can actually drive away. If not, the Banshee won't see any voltage from the sensors, and it won't know how much exhaust pressure and intake pressure you have. You can potentially relay it, something like that, where the edge trips a relay, so then it can switch to power to the monitor. I haven't tried that yet, but regretfully, that's really the only option you have. If you have an edge and you want to have the Banshee push into the edge, you just have to take my sensors, the Autometer and the Honeywell sensors, connect them straight to the universal input for the edge, so the power, ground, and the feedback sensor, and then tap the feedback sensor into the Banshee controller and make it work the way it needs to. So I'm going to drive around a little bit, show you guys how much my drive pressure is versus my boost pressure. Now I currently have the settings set 0.8 to 1. So whenever you give it gas, you know, there's delay. So you have to basically build turbine speed, you have to build exhaust pressure to get everything to move. And then once the turbine actually starts spinning, it's going to help push some of that exhaust pressure out. So then it will actually retract the turbo end just a little bit. But if you gun it and you have a lot of pressure, you just keep holding it, you should see your intake pressure climb, and you should see your exhaust pressure, you know, start to equalize, come back down. My truck has 329,978,000 miles. Definitely could probably use a refresh and new injectors. So even before I swapped on the whole set VGT, it was still a little smoky. So on the common rails, the exhaust brake kicks off at once you hit 20 miles an hour. It's completely autonomous, so once you connect it to the ECU, you flip the exhaust brake switch, you give it gas. Once you get in a third gear and it locks the converter, when you take your foot off the gas, the exhaust braking will engage. If you give it gas, it disengages, and you slow down to 20 miles an hour, the ECU disengages. But if you have a VP44 or if you have a P-pump, I can simulate the same effect even though you don't have a throttle position sensor on the P-pumps. And basically what happens is once your engine RPMs drop below the threshold, on my setup I set it to 950, you want it roughly 200 RPMs above your normal engine speed. So if you idle at 750, then you want it to be about 950. And this just prevents you from bogging the motor down. So the other thing to keep in mind, if you keep driving with the exhaust brake on like I am, it essentially stalls your turbo out. So when you try to accelerate again, you're going to have a little bit more turbo lag than you normally would, because you have to, the speed of the turbine has to increase again. So the turbo PSI is actually showing 0.1. If you look at the GUI for the software, I'm actually idling about 17,000 RPMs in a turbine. Now it's down to 16. Right now I'm doing about 44,000 RPMs.